The night started in a very ordinary way. My girlfriend and I were standing in our kitchen, deciding whether we had time to stop for coffee before my sister's engagement dinner, when she asked if I wanted the navy blazer or the gray one. I remember the sound of the dishwasher running. I remember the smell of her vanilla hand cream when she fixed my collar. It felt like one of those small, forgettable evenings families have all the time. By 9 o'clock, I was standing in a rooftop restaurant in Charlotte, looking at a seating table that had everyone's name on it except mine. My sister looked over my shoulder, laughed once, and said, "Oh, I didn't think you were actually coming." I didn't say anything right away. I just nodded like maybe I had heard her wrong. My girlfriend, Nora, stood beside me with one hand lightly resting against my arm. She didn't speak either. She just read the room faster than I did. A week later, I would be sitting alone in my car outside a county records office, holding a printed confirmation email that wasn't real. But that night, all I did was step away from the table and let my sister drift back into her party. My name is Ryan. I'm 30. I work in software implementation for a hospital network outside Raleigh. It's stable work. Nothing flashy. The kind of job people don't really understand until something breaks, and then suddenly it matters a lot. I've always been the steady one in my family. Low noise. Low maintenance. Easy to count on. For a long time, I thought that was a good thing. My younger sister, Mallory, is 2 years younger than I am, and somehow she has always moved through the world like a spotlight follows her around. Not because she's especially talented, more because she expects attention and most people eventually give it to her. She had built a decent following online by posting lifestyle clips, product links, little slices of her day arranged to look effortless. My parents loved it. They talked about her like she was building an empire. If I mentioned a promotion, my mother usually blinked and asked whether that meant I was still doing computer support. I learned early not to compete with that. I showed up, brought a gift, made conversation, left early when I could. Holidays, birthdays, Mother's Day brunches where Mallory somehow turned the meal into a panel discussion about herself. I kept things civil, mostly because it seemed easier than naming what was obvious. She didn't really see me as a person. She saw me as useful background. When she got engaged to her fiancé, Grant, I found out the same way everyone else did. A family group text, ring photo, champagne glasses, 3 different white heart emojis. My mother followed up the next morning with, "You're happy for your sister, right?" I said yes, because that answer required the least energy. Nora was the one who talked me into attending the engagement dinner. She has a very calm way of saying practical things. That morning, while the bathroom mirror fogged up from the shower, she said, "It's one evening. We go, we smile, we stay an hour, and then we get pie somewhere quiet." That sounded manageable. The restaurant was downtown, on the top floor of a renovated hotel. Low gold lighting, glass walls, music just loud enough to make everyone lean in when they spoke. The host's stand was covered in white flowers that smelled faintly sweet, almost powdery. One long table stretched across the room with place cards set out beside folded napkins and thin-stemmed glasses. I scanned the names once, then again more slowly. My father, my mother, Grant's parents, 2 of Mallory's friends from Atlanta, her college roommate, a cousin I hadn't seen in years. Nothing for me, nothing for Nora. She leaned a little closer to the table and said, very softly, "Maybe they added another section?" I already knew they hadn't. Before I could answer, Mallory came toward us holding a pale pink drink in one hand. Her heels clicked across the floor in quick, sharp taps. Grant followed half a step behind her, smiling at somebody over my shoulder. "Ryan," she said, like I had shown up at the wrong address. Then she gave that short laugh. "I didn't think you were actually coming." I kept my face still. "Why wouldn't I come?" She shrugged. "You're usually busy. And this is more of a formal dinner thing." There was a pause after that. Small. Clean. I could feel Nora waiting beside me, letting me decide whether to say anything else. Mallory turned to her instead. "Nora, you look adorable. That dress is very you." Nora smiled politely. "Thank you." Mallory pointed toward a cluster of high-top tables near the bar. "There's open seating over there. It's more casual, but honestly that might be easier." Easier. Then she was gone again, moving back toward the main table before I could decide whether what had just happened was intentional. It was intentional. I knew that almost immediately. Still, I walked with Nora to the bar area and sat down like a person who was trying very hard to remain reasonable. The stool felt too tall. The room felt colder from that side. A server brought us water without asking if we were with the engagement party. At the long table, someone tapped a glass for attention. My mother was already smiling before the first toast began. Nora rested her hand on my knee under the table and left it there. I picked up the drink menu and put it back down without reading it. Then I looked over once more at the place cards lined up in neat white rows. My family gathered around them like none of this was strange at all. Then I waited. From the bar, the whole dinner looked polished from a distance. Candles ran down the center of the table in low glass holders. A server moved between chairs carrying plates that gave off a warm smell of butter and rosemary. Every few minutes, I could hear my mother's laugh rise above the music. Not loud, just bright enough to carry. The kind of laugh she uses when she wants a room to know she's pleased. Nora and I were close enough to see everything and far enough away to understand exactly where we had been placed. A waiter eventually came over and asked if we wanted to order from the bar menu. His voice was kind, careful, like he already suspected something was off. Nora ordered sparkling water with lime. I asked for bourbon, mostly to have something to do with my hands. For a while, I said almost nothing. I watched my father stand to give a toast. He held his glass at chest level and talked about family, commitment, how proud he was that Mallory had built such a beautiful life for herself. My mother dabbed at the corners of her eyes with a folded napkin. Grant kept one arm around Mallory's chair as if he were anchoring her in place. No one looked over at our table. That was the part one noticed most. Not the missing seat. Not even the comment. It was how natural it seemed to everyone else. Nora took a sip of her water and set the glass down gently. You don't have to pretend this is fine. Her tone stayed even. She never pushes when she can simply name a fact. I looked down at the condensation on my glass. I know. You were invited. Technically. She glanced toward the main table. No. Invited people get chairs. I let out a breath through my nose. Not quite a laugh. The truth was, none of this felt new. Embarrassing, yes, but not new. When you grow up as the easy child in a family like mine, people learn they can shift things onto you because you won't object. If plans change, you'll adjust. If feelings get bruised, yours can wait. If there's a misunderstanding, you'll be the one expected to smooth it over because you're reasonable. You're calm. You're not like your sister. That last part had followed me most of my life. Mallory could ruin Thanksgiving by deciding the mashed potatoes were wrong and somehow still leave as the person everyone comforted. She could forget birthdays, show up late, speak sharply to people, borrow money without returning it, and there would always be some explanation waiting for her. She was stressed. She was overwhelmed. She had a lot going on. She didn't mean it that way. If I pulled back even a little, I was cold. If I objected, I was sensitive. If I got quiet, I was punishing people. It had been like that for years, so gradually that I'm not sure I could point to the exact start. I just know I spent a long time adjusting myself to fit around it. A plate finally arrived for us nearly half an hour after everyone else had started eating. Not one of the plated dinners from the main event. Ours looked pieced together from the smaller shareable dishes being passed around the room. The server placed them down with an apologetic look. "I'm sorry for the delay," he said quietly. That sentence landed harder than I expected. Not because of the food, because a stranger had noticed enough to apologize. I thanked him, and he gave a small nod before walking away. Nora picked up her fork, then put it back down. "Do you want to leave?" I looked toward the long table again. Mallory was leaning into one of Grant's cousins for a photo, smiling with that open-mouthed expression she used online when she wanted to look spontaneous. My mother was beside her, sitting tall, posture perfect, taking in the whole scene like it confirmed something important. "If we leave now," I said, "it becomes a thing." Nora gave me a look that was almost sympathetic and almost tired. "Ryan, it already is a thing." She was right, of course. Still, I stayed. That was my habit then, staying past the point where a clearer person would have left. Later, after desserts had started making their way around the room, the final insult arrived in such a clean, ordinary way that for a second I honestly thought I had misunderstood it. A waiter approached our high-top table carrying a slim black folder. He stopped directly beside me. "Sir," he said, "whenever you're ready." I looked at the folder, then up at him. "I'm sorry, the check." His expression changed almost immediately. Not defensive, just uncertain. He glanced once toward the front of the room, as if replaying a conversation in his mind. "There may have been some confusion," he said. I was told this would be with you. Nora straightened in her chair. We're not hosting this event, she said, still perfectly polite. We weren't even seated with the party. The waiter's eyes moved from her to me and back again. He understood all of it in about 2 seconds. The folder stayed in his hand. I apologize, he said. Let me take care of that. He left before I could answer. I sat there with my hand still resting near the edge of the table, pulse steady but heavier now, like something firm had settled into place inside me. Nora didn't say anything for a moment. She just looked at me with that same clear expression she had worn at the seating chart. Then she asked, "Was that your sister?" I nodded once. She leaned back in her chair. Okay. Just that. No speech. No outrage. Just a calm acknowledgement that this was no longer deniable. We left 10 minutes later without announcing it to anyone. No one stopped us. No one noticed in time to stop us. The elevator ride down was quiet except for a faint instrumental version of some pop song playing through the speakers. In the lobby, the air smelled faintly like polished wood and coffee. Outside, the night was warm, and the city noise felt strangely soft after the restaurant. Neither of us spoke until we were in the car. I started the engine, then turned it off again. Nora folded her hands in her lap and looked straight ahead through the windshield. Say it. I kept my eyes on the steering wheel. I think they actually expected me to pay for the whole thing. I know. I don't even think it was last minute. I think that was the plan. I know. There was no anger in her voice. No surprise either. Just certainty. I sat back against the seat and looked out at the traffic moving through the intersection ahead of us. Red lights. Brake lights. Reflections on glass. For a few seconds, I let myself feel what I had been trying not to feel all evening. Not rage. Something cleaner than that. Recognition. Nora turned slightly toward me. This isn't about tonight only. No, it's older than tonight. I nodded. That was the first time I said it out loud, even indirectly. Not to my parents. Not to Mallory. Not even fully to myself. But once Nora said it, I couldn't put it back where it had been. We drove to a diner 20 minutes outside downtown because neither of us wanted to go straight home carrying all that silence. The place was nearly empty. One older couple in a booth. A teenager refilling sugar containers behind a counter. The air smelled like coffee, lemon cleaner, and fried batter. Nora ordered tea. I ordered pie I didn't really want. For a while, we just sat there under the low yellow lights, listening to the soft clatter from the kitchen. Then she asked, "Has your family always done this?" I knew what she meant, even though the question was broad. I took a moment before answering. Not always this openly. She waited, so I told her some of it. Not everything. Not yet. Just enough to make the pattern visible. The time Mallory borrowed money from me in college and told our parents it had been a gift because I felt bad for her. The Christmas she opened the laptop I bought her for a freelance project and said, in front of everyone, that it was not really her aesthetic. The year I got promoted and my mother told relatives I was finally settling into a decent job while spending the same dinner praising Mallory for posting 3 sponsored skincare videos in 1 month. Nora listened the way she always does, without interrupting the shape of what someone is trying to say. When I stopped, she wrapped both hands around her tea mug and said, "You know this isn't going to get better on its own." I looked at the sugar packets lined up in their small metal holder. I know, and if you keep being the reasonable one, they'll keep building everything on top of that. There it was again. Not dramatic, just accurate. I drove home with the windows cracked and the radio off. At our apartment, I loosened my tie, left my shoes by the door, and stood in the kitchen while Nora filled the kettle. The room was quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator. I could still see the white place cards in my mind. The neat handwriting. The order of them. The empty space where mine should have been. My phone buzzed twice on the counter. A family group message. Mallory had already posted photos from the dinner. Candles. Champagne. Smiling faces. In one picture, you could see the edge of the bar behind the main table. Not me. Not Nora. Just enough of the corner to know where we had been. Then came another message from my mother. "Wasn't tonight lovely?" I looked at the screen for a long second. Then I turned the phone face down. The next morning, an envelope from the dinner venue appeared in my inbox. It was a copy of the event receipt, sent automatically after the reservation closed. I hadn't paid it. My card wasn't on file. But my name was listed in the billing note anyway. Then I waited. I didn't answer my mother's message that night, and I didn't answer it the next morning either. Instead, I made coffee, opened my laptop at the kitchen table, and clicked through the receipt from the venue one line at a time. The apartment was still cool from the overnight air. Nora was in the shower. Water moved through the pipes in short bursts while I read. At the top of the invoice was the event name. Below that, the guest count, menu package, service charge, alcohol minimum. And in a small billing note near the bottom, under internal comments, one line, brother handling final ballots. Ryan confirmed. I read it twice. Then I saved the PDF to a folder on my desktop. That was the moment something changed for me. Not emotionally, logistically. Up to then, I had still been thinking about what happened as an insult. A family slight. Something ugly but familiar. Once I saw my name written into the billing note, it stopped being vague. It became a record, a decision, something concrete enough to examine. Nora came into the kitchen in socks and an oversized t-shirt, hair damp, drying one hand with a dish towel. She looked at my face, then at the laptop. What is it? I turned the screen toward her. She read the line quietly. Her expression didn't change much. That was one thing I appreciated about her. When something was serious, she got calmer, not louder. They used your name with the venue? Looks like it. Did you confirm anything? No. She nodded once. Save everything. I almost smiled. Already did. That day was a Saturday, and under normal circumstances I would have gone to the gym, picked up groceries, answered a few work messages, moved on. Instead, I started organizing. I made a folder called Family. Inside it, I created subfolders by date. Screenshots from the group chat. Save the date envelope with Ryan plus guest scribbled in blue ink. The dinner receipt. The text from my mother asking if I was happy for my sister. A screenshot of Mallory's engagement post. I wasn't even fully sure why I was doing it yet. I just knew I was done relying on memory alone. When someone spends years rewriting reality around you, paperwork starts to matter. By noon, I had a timeline. By 2, I had gone back through old email threads and found 2 more things I hadn't thought much about at the time. One was from 3 months earlier, when my mother had emailed me a rough vendor list for the engagement dinner, just so everyone knows the plan. My name had been copied on it under a section labeled Family Support with no explanation. The second was stranger. A forwarded note from Mallory to a venue coordinator, sent by mistake to the full family thread before she deleted it a minute later. Most people probably never noticed. I had. At the time I let it pass. Now I pulled it back up. It read, my brother Ryan will handle anything logistical if there are questions. He's easier than my dad. I stared at that sentence for a while. Easier than my dad. There it was. The whole family role, compressed into 7 words. Nora was sitting across from me now, eating toast with peanut butter and reading on her tablet. She looked up when I set my mug down. You found more. I turned the screen so she could read it. She did, then leaned back slowly. That's not casual. No, that's a system. That word stayed with me. A system. Not one bad night. Not one mean comment. A system of assumptions built over years. My time was available. My money was available. My name was available. And if I objected, I would become the problem. For the rest of that weekend, I didn't contact anyone. Not my parents. Not Mallory. I let the silence hold. Monday morning, I went to work. The office sat on the 3rd floor of a low brick building near the hospital campus. Fluorescent lights. Gray carpet. The usual smell of stale coffee and printer toner in the hallway. On paper, it was a completely separate world from my family. In practice, it reminded me of something useful. I was not confused. I handled systems for a living. I knew how to track decisions, identify weak points, and verify what had actually happened. At lunch, I stayed at my desk and opened the venue's website again. Then I called. A woman from events picked up after 2 rings. Her voice was bright and practiced. I kept my tone neutral. Hi, I had a quick question about a private dinner held Friday night under the name Mallory Bennett. I gave a shortened version of the truth. I said there seemed to be confusion afterward about a billing note attached to my name, and I wanted to confirm whether I had ever been listed as a responsible party. The woman put me on hold. I waited, watching a forklift move pallets across the loading dock outside my window. When she came back, her voice had changed slightly. More careful now. I can confirm your name appears only in an internal note. You were not listed as the contracting party, and no payment authorization was attached to your information. Do you know who added the note? I'm not able to provide staff details, but it appears to have been entered during final planning communication. Was it based on anything written from me? A pause. No, sir. I thanked her and ended the call. Then I opened a blank document and typed out the date, time, name of venue, and summary of the conversation while it was still fresh. Not because I planned to do anything dramatic with it, because I didn't want their version to be the only version left later. That evening, my mother called. I watched the phone ring until it stopped. Then Mallory texted me. Hey, you left kind of fast Friday. Everything okay? I looked at the message for a moment. Not an apology, not even a question about the missing seat. Just the soft opening people use when they want to keep control of the tone. I didn't answer. She texted again 20 minutes later. Mom said you seemed weird. If this is about seating, it was just crowded LOL. I took a screenshot and saved it. Then I put the phone face down. Over the next 2 weeks, wedding planning moved forward around me as if nothing had happened. Photos online, registry links, group messages about floral colors and hotel blocks. My mother dropping details into the family chat like we were all participating equally in some warm shared event. I stayed mostly silent. That silence unsettled them more than anger would have. My father called once and left a voicemail asking whether I was good. My mother sent 3 messages in a single afternoon, each one lighter than the last, trying to nudge me back into the usual pattern. Don't let little misunderstandings grow. Your sister has so much on her plate. Family should keep perspective. I archived all of it. A week later, a cream-colored envelope arrived at the apartment. The wedding invitation. Heavy cardstock. Raised lettering. Expensive enough to announce itself. My full name was spelled correctly this time, but Nora's wasn't listed anywhere. Just Ryan Mercer on the envelope. No guest line included on the RSVP card. I stood by the kitchen counter turning the card over in my hand while late afternoon sun came through the window. The paper felt thick and cool. Intentional. Nora read it over my shoulder. They dropped me. Looks like it. That wasn't a mistake either. No. She pulled out a chair and sat down. Are you going? I looked at the invitation again. Venue. Rose Hill Manor. Ceremony at 4. Reception to follow. Black tie optional. On the lower card, a registry link. And on the back, in my mother's handwriting. Hope you can make this one special. Not hope you can make it. Hope you can make this one special. Another phrase that said too much. I set the invitation on the table and took a seat across from Nora. That was the first evening I said what I had been circling around. I think they only want me there if I'm useful. Nora folded one leg under herself in the chair. I think that's been true for a long time. I nodded. I didn't feel hurt hearing it anymore. Mostly I felt clear. She waited a second, then asked, so what are the rules now? That question mattered because it shifted the conversation away from emotion and into structure. I thought about it carefully before I answered. Rule 1, I said. No calls unless I choose to answer. She nodded. Rule 2. Everything important stays in writing. Another nod. Rule 3. I stop correcting things for them automatically. Nora looked at me for a moment. That's a real change. Yes. And if they ask for money? I looked over at the invitation, at the thick paper and elegant printing and all the assumptions folded inside it. Then I say no. She gave a small, approving tilt of her head. Good. 3 days later, my mother called while I was leaving work. I answered this time because I wanted to hear what came next. Her tone was soft from the start, almost careful. Sweetheart, I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time. I have a few minutes. Good. I just wanted to check in. Things have felt tense. I unlocked my car and got inside, but didn't start it yet. The lot was warm from the late-day sun. Somewhere nearby, a helicopter crossed low over the hospital. What did you want to ask me? I said. A brief pause. She sighed lightly. Mallory had a thought. For the wedding. There it was. I leaned back against the seat and looked through the windshield at the row of cars across from me. What thought? Well, she said, you know how expensive these events can get. And since you've always been so practical with money, we wondered whether maybe you'd be willing to help with one piece of it. I didn't answer immediately. She kept going. Nothing unreasonable. Maybe the photographer. Or part of the reception bar. Something meaningful. I let the silence sit long enough for her to hear it. Then I said, you're asking me to contribute financially to a wedding I'm barely included in. Oh, Ryan. Her voice tightened just a little. Please don't make it sound ugly. I'm making it sound accurate. She exhaled through her nose. I could picture the expression on her face without seeing it. You always take things so personally with Mallory. There it was again. Sensitive. Difficult. Personal. The old language, ready on command. I kept my tone flat. At the engagement dinner, there was no seat for me. The venue had a billing note saying I would cover the balance. Nora was excluded from the wedding invitation. Which part would you prefer I take less personally? She was quiet, not shocked, not confused. Quiet in the way people get when facts remove their usual room to maneuver. Finally, she said, I think everyone has been under stress. I almost laughed, but I didn't. Then I'm helping by lowering expectations now. I said, I'm not paying for any part of this wedding. She went silent again. Then, in a smaller voice, I'll tell your sister. Please do. I ended the call first. When I got home, Nora was rinsing lettuce at the sink. I set my keys down, loosened my tie, and told her the conversation almost word for word. She listened without interrupting, then dried her hands and turned to face me. How do you feel? I thought about that. Steady, I said. And it was true. Not triumphant. Not angry. Just steady. That night, at 9:14 p.m., Mallory posted a video from a wedding venue tour. White staircase, chandeliers, polished floors, soft piano music over the top. The caption read, Dream Space. We're so grateful for everyone helping make this happen, especially my brother Ryan. Couldn't do this without you. I read it once. Then I opened my folder and created a new subfolder with that day's date. I didn't contact Mallory after the post. I didn't comment, didn't send a correction, didn't ask her to take my name out of the caption. I just saved the video, captured the timestamp, and added it to the folder. That became the pattern. If they called, I let it go to voicemail unless I had a reason to answer. If they texted, I read it once and decided whether it belonged in the record. Most of it did. Mallory's messages got sweeter after the venue post. My mother's got softer. Even Grant, who had barely spoken more than 20 words to me in the previous year, sent a short note one evening. Hey man, appreciate you stepping up for Mal means a lot. I saved that too. The thing about false stories is that people start building on them almost immediately. One bad sentence becomes 3 assumptions, then 5. Before long, everyone is speaking as if the lie has always been true. By then, I was no longer interested in arguing with any of them casually. I wanted structure, so I made one. On a Sunday afternoon, while Nora was sorting laundry in the bedroom and the windows were cracked to let in the spring air, I sat at the dining table with my laptop and a legal pad and wrote out the next steps. Step 1. Stop verbal confusion. Step 2. Move everything into writing. Step 3. Verify what exists in the real world and what exists only in Mallory's posts. It looked simple on paper. That helped. I started with the easiest part. That evening, I sent one message to my mother, my father, and Mallory in a group text. For clarity, I am not contributing financially to the wedding, and I have not booked or paid for any venue, vendor, or service. Please do not represent otherwise to anyone. I read it twice before sending. No anger, no extra language, just the fact. For 11 minutes, no one responded. Then my mother replied first. No one is trying to upset you. We all know emotions are high. That wasn't a denial. Mallory answered 3 minutes later. Ryan, OMG, this is so formal. It's just social content. Nobody thinks you literally paid for every single thing. I took a screenshot. Then I answered only her. Your caption named me directly. Remove it. A typing bubble appeared. Stopped. Appeared again. Then came the message. You are making this bigger than it is. I didn't answer. The post stayed up for another 14 hours before she quietly edited the caption and removed my name. No apology. No correction to the people who had already seen it. Just a silent revision, as if the problem had been my noticing. That told me everything I needed to know. Step 1 was complete. Step 2 happened the next week in ways my family probably never noticed. I set up a separate email filter so anything from my parents or Mallory went into its own folder. I moved old voicemails into cloud storage. I exported screenshots to PDF by date. I even wrote brief notes after phone calls. Time, duration, summary, exact phrases if I remembered them clearly. None of it felt dramatic while I was doing it. It felt administrative. At work, I often had to trace failed processes back to the moment someone made an assumption and nobody documented it. This felt similar. The emotional part had kept me stuck for years. The documented part made it manageable. The more I organized, the less reactive I felt. Then, in early May, the first crack appeared. I was in the office reviewing rollout notes for a software update when my father called. That alone was unusual. He and I had never been the kind of father and son who called each other casually in the middle of the workday. I stepped into an empty conference room to answer. "Hey," I said. His voice came through low and tight. "You got a minute?" "I do now." He paused like he was trying to decide how honest to be. "There's been an issue with the venue." I sat down at the table and looked out through the glass wall into the quiet hallway. "What kind of issue?" Another pause. Mallory thought things were more confirmed than they were. That sentence was careful enough to make me almost smile. "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means," he said, exhaling hard, "they never finalized the contract." I let that sit between us. He kept going. "They did the tour. They talked to people. They posted about it. But apparently the deposit deadline passed, and now the date is gone. Gone to someone else." "Yes." I leaned back in the chair. Outside the room, two nurses passed the doorway talking softly over iced coffees. Inside, my father waited for me to fill the silence the way I always used to. I didn't. Finally, he said, "Your mother is trying to calm her down. She's a mess." "I'm sure." "Ryan." His tone changed then, a little more direct. "I know there's tension, but she could use someone practical right now." There it was. Not an apology. Not recognition. Utility. "What exactly are you asking me for?" I said. "Just to help. Look around. Make calls. You're good at sorting things out." I looked down at my notes from the software meeting still open on the conference room table. Tasks. Dates. Dependencies. Risks. Then I said, "I'll think about it." He sounded relieved immediately, which told me how fully he expected me to step back into the old role. "Okay, thank you. That's all I'm asking." After the call ended, I sat there for another minute without moving. The wedding was supposed to be in 6 weeks. If the venue was truly gone, Mallory had a serious problem. Not an online problem. A real one. That evening I told Nora everything while she was chopping scallions for dinner. The kitchen smelled like sesame oil and ginger. She kept the knife moving while I repeated my father's exact words. When I finished, she slid the chopped scallions into a bowl and looked up. And I told him I'd think about it. She nodded slowly, not surprised. "Are you going to help?" I pulled out a chair and sat down. "I'm going to verify first." "That's smart. I want to know what's real." Nora rinsed the cutting board, then dried her hands. "And if it's as bad as it sounds?" I thought about that for a second. Then I decided what to do from there. What I didn't say out loud yet was this. I had stopped wanting emotional satisfaction from them. I no longer needed Mallory to understand me or my parents to suddenly become fair. What I wanted now was accuracy. Consequences that matched reality. The next 2 days, I used lunch breaks and early mornings to check what I could. First, I looked up the venue's business registration and contact listings. Then I reviewed archived screenshots of Mallory's posts to match dates against when she claimed the place was locked in. Then I called from my office line and asked a few careful questions as a potential guest trying to confirm details. The event coordinator wouldn't discuss private bookings, which I expected, but she did say one thing that mattered. "We're fully booked for all Saturday dates in June." Fully booked. If Mallory had that date, there would be a contract somewhere. If she didn't, then every post after a certain point had been theater. That same afternoon, Mallory texted me for the first time in over a week. "Hey, Dad said you might know someone who can help with venue stuff?" I read it and set the phone down. A minute later, another message came in. "I know things have been weird, but I really need someone reliable right now." Reliable. I almost admired the honesty of that word. I didn't respond until later that night. What exactly happened with the original booking? Her answer came fast, too fast to have been thought through. Just a paperwork mix-up. They messed up the date. I looked at that for a long moment. Then I typed, "Send me the contract and deposit receipt." No answer. 26 minutes later, "Grant has that stuff." Oh look, she never sent it. Instead, the next morning my mother called and left a voicemail. "Sweetheart, please be gentle with your sister. She's embarrassed enough already." Embarrassed. Not misled. Not dishonest. Embarrassed. I saved the voicemail. By Friday, I had enough to know 2 things. First, Mallory had publicly claimed a venue she very likely never secured. Second, my family still believed I could quietly solve the problem without forcing any of them to say that part plainly. That was when the strategic part became clear. I wasn't going to rescue the wedding. I wasn't going to publicly expose her either. Both options still centered her. One is victim, the other is spectacle. What I wanted was simpler. I wanted her to stand inside the reality she had created without me rushing in to reorganize it. Nora understood before I said it directly. We were sitting on the couch that night with takeout containers on the coffee table between us, muted television light moving across the room. I had just shown her Mallory's unanswered promise to send the contract. She doesn't have one, Nora said. No, and your parents know less than they're pretending to know. Yes. She rested her head back against the couch cushion. So what are you going to do? I answered without hesitation. Nothing fast. That made her smile a little. Good. I looked over at her. You don't think that's cruel? She considered it. No, she said. Cruel would be creating damage. You're just refusing to absorb it. That was the cleanest description of the situation I had heard. The next morning, I sent Mallory a short reply. I'll review options if you send complete information, original venue contact, contract, payment record, guest count, and budget ceiling. Formal on purpose. Specific on purpose. Her answer came 20 minutes later. You always make everything sound like work, LOL, no documents attached. By Monday, she sent a partial guest estimate and a Pinterest board. Nothing else. I didn't reply. 3 hours later, my father texted, "Any progress?" I looked at the message, then at the spreadsheet I had open on my personal laptop. Over the weekend, I had quietly built a real list of alternative venues within driving distance. Capacity, availability windows, deposit ranges, contact names, actual information. Enough to solve the problem if I chose to. I saved the file under a neutral name. Then I answered my father with one sentence. I'm waiting on the documents I requested. Then I put the phone face down. That night, just after 10, Mallory finally emailed me. No contract, no deposit receipt, just a forwarded message thread with a venue sales assistant, a brochure PDF, and a line from Mallory at the top. Can you please just fix this? I read Mallory's email twice. The forwarded thread had no signed contract attached, no payment receipt, no confirmed invoice number, just a brochure, a few enthusiastic messages from a sales assistant, and Mallory's own follow-ups written in the tone she used online, as if excitement itself could substitute for a booking. At the top of the email, above the thread, she had written, "Can you please just fix this?" That was all. No acknowledgement of the lie she had posted using my name. No apology for the dinner. No mention of Nora being cut out of the invitation. Just the request. Clean and familiar. I closed the laptop and sat still for a minute. Nora was already in bed reading when I came into the bedroom. The lamp on her side cast a soft circle of light over the blankets. I told her what was in the email and what wasn't. No contract, she asked. No deposit. No. She marked her place in the book with one finger and looked at me. Then there's nothing to fix. There's only fallout. I changed into a t-shirt and sat on the edge of the bed. My dad's going to keep pushing. Probably. My mother will make it emotional. Yes. And Mallory will try to keep it vague as long as possible. Nora nodded once. Then don't stay in vague. That became the rule for the next day. The following afternoon, I sent one email to Mallory and copied my parents. The wording took me longer than I expected, not because I was emotional, but because I wanted it plain. I reviewed what you sent. There is no signed contract, no deposit confirmation, and no evidence that the original venue was secured. I can't solve a logistics issue without complete and accurate information. If you want practical help, I need the full timeline, actual budget, current guest count, and any written communication from the venue stating your date was confirmed. Otherwise, I'm stepping back. No accusations. No history. Just the missing pieces. My father called 6 minutes later. I let it ring once, then answered. Ryan. His voice was already tight. Did you have to email that to everyone? Yes. She's upset. I stood by the window in my office, looking down at the parking lot below. Heat shimmered faintly over the asphalt. She can be upset, I said. The information is still accurate. He exhaled hard. This doesn't need to turn into a formal process. It already is one. It became one when people started using my name. A pause. Then he shifted the conversation the way my parents always did when facts got uncomfortable. She's your sister. I kept my voice level. And I'm your son. That hasn't seemed to require much accuracy so far. Silence on the line. It wasn't a dramatic silence. Just the sound of someone losing the easier version of the conversation. Finally, he said, Your mother wants us all to sit down tonight. That surprised me a little. My family avoided direct conversations unless they were sure they could control the tone. A group meeting meant the problem had moved beyond what soft messaging could smooth over. Where? I asked. At the house. Their house was 25 minutes away in a quiet neighborhood with long driveways and trimmed hedges and the same porch swing my mother had insisted on repainting every spring. I hadn't been there in 3 weeks. I'll come by after work, I said. Nora looked up from her laptop when I told her. You want me there? I thought about it, then shook my head. Not this time. She closed the screen halfway and studied my face. Are you sure? Yes. She accepted that immediately. Okay, then go in with an agenda. That almost made me smile. You sound like me now. You've had influence. Before I left, I wrote 3 lines on the back of an old receipt and put it in my wallet. Stay with facts. Don't fill silence. Leave when the facts are denied. I arrived at my parents' house just after 6:30. The air outside still held the day's warmth. Someone nearby had cut grass recently, and the smell lingered faintly along the sidewalk. My mother opened the door before I knocked. Her face was set in that controlled, wounded expression she used when she wanted to appear gracious under strain. Hi, sweetheart. I nodded. Mom. She touched my forearm lightly as I stepped inside, a gesture meant to suggest closeness before any real repair had happened. I let it pass. My father was in the dining room, standing with one hand braced against the back of a chair. Mallory sat at the table already, phone face down beside her, arms crossed tightly enough to flatten the fabric at her elbows. She had clearly been crying earlier, but by then she looked less fragile than irritated. The room was neat in the way my mother's house always was. Placemats aligned, fruit bowls centered, late sun slanting through the blinds across the table. It could have been any ordinary family evening except for the strain sitting in the middle of it. No one offered coffee. No one pretended this was casual. I took the empty chair opposite Mallory and set my keys on the table beside me. My mother spoke first. I hate that it's come to this. I said nothing. She folded her hands in front of her. Your sister is under an unbelievable amount of pressure. What she needs right now is support, not scrutiny. Mallory let out a small sound through her nose, half laugh, half disbelief, as if the word scrutiny itself proved I was overdoing things. I looked at my mother. Support for what, specifically? For the wedding, she said. For all of this. It's become a mess. Yes, I said. That part is clear. My father pulled out his chair and sat down, though he stayed angled slightly away, like he might still leave the table first if he could. Mallory finally spoke. You are making this so much worse than it needs to be. Her voice was calm, but only in the way people get calm when anger is still close underneath. I looked at her. By asking for documents? By acting like I committed fraud. I let that sit for a second. Did you have the venue booked? She shifted in her chair. We were in process. That's not what you posted. That's because social media isn't a legal filing, Ryan. My mother gave a quick, approving nod at that line like Mallory had landed something clever. I kept my tone even. Did you or did you not tell people the venue was confirmed? Mallory looked away first, toward the window. Everybody says things before every detail is finalized. Did you use my name publicly after I told you I wasn't paying for anything? Now she snapped her eyes back to me. You are obsessed with that. No, I said. I'm being specific. That changed the room. People who live on tone get uncomfortable very quickly when someone refuses to leave the facts. My father rubbed once at his forehead. Ryan, what is it you actually want here? There it was. The question behind the meeting. Not what happened. Not what's true. Just what will make you stop. I answered him plainly. I want reality stated correctly. No one spoke. So I continued. Mallory publicly claimed she had a venue she didn't secure. She used my name in posts implying I was financially supporting the wedding after I had already refused. At the engagement dinner, I was left off the seating plan, and the restaurant had an internal note saying I'd handle the balance. Nora was excluded from the invitation. Then, when the venue fell through, all of you contacted me because you wanted practical help without acknowledging any of that. Mallory scoffed and looked at my mother as if inviting her to react. Instead, I stayed with the table. I'm not here to debate anyone's feelings about those facts. I'm here to name them. The room went quiet in a different way after that. Heavier, less maneuvering space. My mother's eyes had gone glassy now, but her voice stayed controlled. You make everything sound so cold. I nodded once. That's because warmth has been used here to avoid accuracy. That landed harder than I expected. My father looked down at the table. Mallory stared at me with open anger now, the performance layers slipping. You think you're better than everyone, she said. No, you always do this, she said, leaning forward. You sit there all calm and superior and make normal family mistakes sound like some giant moral failure. I folded my hands loosely in front of me. Leaving me off the seating plan was not a mistake. It was crowded. The restaurant note naming me for payment wasn't a mistake either. She looked at my mother. Are you hearing this? I kept going, same volume, same pace. The caption naming me after I declined financial involvement was not a mistake. The missing contract is not a mistake. Those are decisions. My father finally looked up. All right. It came out sharper than anything else he had said. All right. Enough. He looked between us, then settled on me. What do you want done now? That was the first useful question anyone had asked. I reached into my wallet, pulled out the folded receipt paper with my 3 lines on it, and set it beside my keys without looking at it. Then I answered, 3 things. Mallory gave a short laugh. Of course there are 3 things. I ignored that. First, I want my name removed from any remaining public posts, vendor threads, or messages implying I'm paying for or organizing this wedding. I looked at Mallory until she met my eyes. Second, if anyone asks me for help going forward, the request comes with complete written information. No more vague stories. No more last-minute emotional calls. Then I looked at both of my parents. Third, Nora is not to be treated as optional again. If I'm invited to something, she is included respectfully, or I'm not attending. My mother opened her mouth, then closed it. Mallory leaned back in her chair. This is insane. No, I said. It's orderly. My father stared at the table for a long moment, then nodded once. It wasn't agreement exactly. More like recognition that I had put the room into a structure he couldn't talk around. My mother spoke softly. And if we don't do that? I picked up my keys. Then I stepped back completely. No one raised their voice. No one knocked a chair over. That was the strange part. For all the years of tension underneath my family, the confrontation itself was almost quiet. Just a series of facts laid out in a clean room while the people around them tried to decide whether reality could still be negotiated. Mallory stood first. This is unbelievable, she said. You wait until I'm already drowning, and then you make it all about rules. I stood too. No, I waited until rules were the only thing left. She looked like she wanted a louder fight than that. Something Messier she could point to later. I didn't give her one. My mother stayed seated, one hand at her throat now, eyes wet but unreadable. My father looked tired in a way I hadn't seen before. Not transformed, not suddenly wise, just tired. I picked up my keys. Then I left. Outside, the evening had cooled. The cicadas had started up in the trees, and someone down the street was rolling a trash bin toward the curb. Normal sounds. Steady sounds. I sat in my car for a minute before starting the engine. Then my phone lit up on the passenger seat. It was an email from Mallory. No subject line. One attachment. One screenshot. And for the first time, it contained actual numbers. I stayed parked under the streetlight outside my parents' house and opened the email on my phone. The screenshot was from Mallory's banking app. At the top, a pending outgoing transfer to the venue that had never held her date. Under it, a note field she had typed herself. Deposit for June 17th wedding. The amount was large enough to matter and small enough to suggest panic rather than planning. She hadn't paid it when it would have secured anything. She had tried to send it after the date was already gone. That explained the tone of the room. Not just embarrassment. Exposure. I drove home in silence and waited until I was in our apartment kitchen before telling Nora what she had sent. She was rinsing out 2 mugs from the morning, sleeves pushed up, hair tied back. The overhead light reflected off the stainless steel sink. She finally sent proof? She asked. Sort of. I handed her my phone. She read the screenshot and handed it back. That's not confirmation. That's desperation. Yes. And she sent it right after you left? Immediately. Nora dried her hands on a towel. So now she wants the record to show effort. That was exactly what it was. Not proof that the venue had failed her. Proof that she had tried, late, to make a version of her story true after the fact. I sat down at the table and opened my laptop. The folder was already there on the desktop. Dates, screenshots, notes, archived voicemails. I added the bank screenshot, then created a simple timeline document. Inquiry with venue. Public posts claiming confirmation. My refusal to fund anything. Post naming me anyway. Venue lost. Family request for help. No contract produced. Late transfer attempt. I kept the wording dry on purpose. Nora leaned against the counter watching me type. What are you doing? Finishing it. Not dramatically. Not emotionally. I just wanted the sequence in one place where it couldn't be softened later. The next morning, before work, I received 3 messages in under 15 minutes. One from my mother. Last night went badly. Can we please reset? One from my father. Your sister is trying. And one from Mallory. I sent what I had. If you wanted to help, you would. That one made things especially clear. Not I'm sorry. Not here's the full picture. Just another test of whether I would resume my old function if the pressure was worded correctly. I didn't answer any of them before work. At lunch, I got coffee and sat alone in a side conference room with the blinds half open and my phone on the table in front of me. Then I did the only thing that still felt useful. I called the venue directly. Not to argue, not to pressure them, just to confirm the timeline. A different coordinator answered this time. A man with a patient voice who sounded like he had handled a lot of wedding emergencies. I introduced myself carefully and said I was trying to understand whether there had ever been a confirmed booking under Mallory Bennett or Grant Holloway for June 17th. He asked me to hold. I waited, looking out at the delivery trucks moving behind the hospital. When he came back, he chose his words very deliberately. I can confirm there was no executed contract for that date under either name. Was a deposit ever accepted? No. A payment attempt was made after the date was no longer available. That matched the screenshot. Was the couple told the date was secure before that? Another pause. Our team had discussed options, but no date is reserved without contract and deposit. That is standard. Standard. That was the word I needed. I thanked him, ended the call, and wrote down the date, time, and exact phrases while they were fresh. Third-party confirmation. Timeline. Numbers. Once I had that, the emotional fog cleared almost completely. That evening, I sent one final email to my parents and Mallory. No attachment, just text. I confirmed today that there was never an executed contract for June 17th and no accepted deposit. A payment attempt was made only after the date was unavailable. That means the venue was never secured, despite public posts stating otherwise. I'm not participating in any effort to rewrite that timeline. Going forward, do not use my name in connection with this wedding, any venue issue, or any financial support. If anyone asks me directly, I will state the facts accurately. I read it once more, then sent it. For nearly an hour, nothing happened. Then my father called. I answered because I wanted to hear his voice after seeing the facts written that plainly. He sounded older somehow. Not broken, just worn down. So that's it, he asked. Yes. You're really not going to help. I already did help, I said. I helped by getting the truth straight. He was quiet. Then he said something I didn't expect. I should have stepped in earlier. I didn't answer right away. He kept going, slowly now. At the dinner. After. Probably before that too. It wasn't a full reckoning. It wasn't some perfect apology that repaired 20 years of unevenness. But it was the first sentence from either parent that pointed in the right direction. I let the silence stay there for a second before I replied. Yes, I said. You should have. He exhaled. No argument after that. What happens now, he asked. That depends on what everyone does next. He seemed to accept that. My mother did not. She called the next morning and cried before she finished hello. Not loud crying. Controlled crying. The kind meant to carry a message while still sounding respectable. You're tearing this family apart over one mistake. I stood by the sink with one hand on the counter and listened. When she finished, I said, no. I'm refusing to cover it. That made her go quiet. Then came the usual shift. You're being so hard. I'm being accurate. And where does that leave us? This time I already had the answer. It leaves us with boundaries. She didn't like that word. I could hear it in the way she repeated it back to me. Softer and almost disbelieving. Boundaries. Yes. I didn't explain further. I didn't argue. I just stayed there until the conversation had nowhere else to go. Eventually, she said she had to go and ended the call herself. Mallory reacted last, and most predictably. 2 days later, she posted a video. Soft lighting. No makeup. Pale sweater. A slow, sad voice. She talked about stress, betrayal, trust, how painful it was to discover that some people would rather be right than be kind. She never said my name, but she didn't need to. By then, though, the comments were not going the way she wanted. People had noticed the inconsistent venue story. Some had seen the earlier caption naming me and the quiet edit afterward. Others asked why there had been wedding posts from a place that clearly didn't have an event that day. One wedding vendor she had tagged publicly commented that bookings require signed agreements and deposits, then deleted the comment an hour later. But not before plenty of people had seen it. That was the part one found almost oddly peaceful. I didn't have to expose her. The system did that on its own. A timeline either fits the record or it doesn't. A number either clears or it doesn't. A contract exists or it doesn't. Once enough ordinary facts lined up in public view, the consequences felt less like revenge and more like gravity. Within a week, several of the small brand accounts she had been working with stopped reposting her wedding content. One local planner quietly removed her from a collaboration page. The venue she had tagged most aggressively posted a general note about the importance of confirmed bookings and written agreements. They didn't mention Mallory by name. They didn't have to. The wedding itself didn't fully collapse, but it changed shape. That part came through my father in a brief email 3 weeks later. Smaller ceremony. Private room at a restaurant. Immediate family only. No outside content. He included the new date and nothing else. No request for money. No request for help. No request for forgiveness. I replied with one line. I won't be attending, but I wish you a calm day. He answered, understood. That was it. Nora and I spent the original wedding weekend packing boxes for our move. We had signed a lease on a townhouse a little farther from the city, with better light and a small back patio and enough room for a desk that didn't sit in our dining area. On Saturday afternoon, while Mallory should have been standing under chandeliers she never secured, I was wrapping dishes in packing paper and labeling kitchen boxes in black marker. The apartment smelled like cardboard and tape. Nora carried a stack of folded towels past me and smiled. You seem lighter. I set a marker down on the counter and considered that. I think I am. Not happy about what happened. Not proud of it. Just lighter. Because the truth was no longer stuck in my throat. Because I had stopped negotiating with versions of reality designed to keep me useful. Because for once, the record matched what actually happened. Late that evening, while we were eating takeout on the floor between half-packed boxes, I got one more message from Mallory. No greeting. No apology. Just a photo of the new ceremony setup. Small table. White flowers. Private dining room. Plain enough to be almost tasteful. Under it she wrote, "This is what it came to. Hope you're satisfied." I looked at the message for a moment. Then I locked the screen and set the phone aside. "I'm not satisfied," I said to Nora. She looked up from her noodles. No, I said. "I'm finished." Then I waited. The week after that message, I finished packing the last of the kitchen by myself on a quiet Tuesday evening. Nora was still at work. The apartment was half empty in that strange, echoing way a place gets right before you leave it. One cabinet door was open above me. Bubble wrap sat in a loose pile on the counter. The only sounds were the tape pulling off the roll and the refrigerator humming in the corner. I washed 2 mugs we had kept out on purpose, dried them, and wrapped them in paper more carefully than I needed to. Then I labeled the box in black marker and slid it against the wall with the others. That was how it felt by then. Not dramatic, not triumphant, just orderly. The smaller wedding happened the following weekend at a private dining room in a restaurant outside Greensboro. I know that because my father sent one short email afterward. It's done. Everyone is okay. No photos attached. No request to revisit anything. No effort to pull me back into the performance after the fact. I replied with a simple note wishing them well and left it there. For a while, that was enough. My mother still reached out now and then, but the messages changed over time. Fewer emotional ambushes. More practical things. A question about whether I wanted an old box of school papers she found in the attic. A note that my aunt had asked about me. Once a recipe. Small, ordinary contact with less pressure folded into it. I answered some of those messages. Not all. I chose what I could respond to without stepping back into the old arrangement. My father got quieter, but in a more honest way. He called once to ask how the move was going. We talked for 8 minutes about furniture, commute times, and whether the new place had decent shade in the yard. He never mentioned Mallory. He also never tried to hand me a problem to solve. That mattered more than anything he could have said. With Mallory, the distance stayed in place. She didn't apologize. Not really. A month later, I got a text that said, Things got ugly, and I know everyone was under pressure. That was as close as she came. It wasn't enough, and I didn't pretend otherwise. I answered with one line. I'm keeping distance for now. She reacted with a thumbs up. Oddly enough, that was one of the clearest exchanges we had ever had. Nora and I settled into the townhouse slowly. We bought a narrow shelf for the entryway, then plants for the back patio, then a heavier set of curtains for the room I turned into an office. In the mornings, light came into the kitchen from the east side and landed across the table in a way that made the whole room feel clean before we had done anything at all. I started walking before work again. Just 20 minutes around the neighborhood with coffee in a travel mug, listening to sprinklers click on and dogs bark behind fences and the low rustle of trees over the sidewalk. That routine did more for me than I expected. It gave the day edges, beginning, end, a sense that my life belonged to me in small, repeatable ways. At work, things got better too. Not because of revenge or closure, just because I could think more clearly with less noise in the background. I took on a larger implementation project in July and handled it well. My manager noticed. Then the director did. In August, I was offered a leadership track I had probably been ready for a year earlier, but hadn't had the energy to pursue. I accepted it without telling my family right away. That choice would have felt secretive once. By then it just felt private. One Saturday morning in early fall, Nora and I were reorganizing the hall closet. She stood on a step stool passing things down to me while I sorted donation bags from storage bins. The air smelled faintly like dust and cedar from an old set of shelves the previous tenant had left behind. In one of the back corners, I found the folded receipt paper I had used the night of the meeting at my parents' house. Stay with facts. Don't fill silence. Leave when the facts are denied. I looked at it for a second and laughed quietly to myself. Nora climbed down from the stool and asked, "What?" I handed it to her. She read it and smiled. "Still good rules." "Yes," I said. "For more than family, probably." She handed it back, and I tucked it into the side pocket of a file box instead of throwing it away. Because that was the part one wanted to keep. Not the humiliation from the dinner. Not the false posts. Not even the confrontation. Just the lesson that calm is useful when it's attached to clarity. That silence can be a choice. That records matter. That stepping back is not the same as giving in. I've thought about Mallory a little differently since then too. Not kindly, exactly, but more accurately. For years I treated her behavior like weather. Unpleasant, unpredictable, impossible to change. What I missed was how many people had rearranged themselves around it, including me. Once I stopped doing that, her reach got smaller. Not because she changed, because I did. That's the part people don't always understand when they talk about family conflict. They think the resolution has to be dramatic to count. A confession, a breakdown, a big final speech in the driveway. Usually it's quieter. Usually it's a document saved in the right folder. A message answered later, not immediately. A boundary repeated without decoration. A dinner invitation declined without a paragraph attached. A Saturday morning where you realize your shoulders are no longer tense in your own kitchen. That was the real ending for me. Not the ruined venue. Not the edited captions. Not the smaller ceremony. The real ending was one ordinary evening when Nora was reading on the couch, pasta water was boiling on the stove, and my phone buzzed with a family group update I didn't feel obligated to open right away. I set the phone face down, stirred the pot, and kept going. Then I noticed something almost funny. The silence no longer felt like punishment. It felt like peace. A few months after everything settled down, my cousin Daniel called me out of nowhere. He lives in Virginia, works in commercial roofing, and usually only reaches out around holidays. This time he sounded hesitant.